Have you ever wondered what happens when someone who constantly craves the spotlight, who lives for recognition, runs into a person who simply doesn't care to please them? Imagine a narcissist with a booming voice and flamboyant presence walking into a room and instantly turning it into their personal stage. They talk about their latest success, the expensive car they just bought, or the high-stepper relationships they proudly parade around as social trophies. Most people get drawn in. Some offer praise to keep the peace, others stay quiet but still listen, even if it makes them uncomfortable inside. But then they meet someone different, someone who doesn't clap, doesn't marvel, doesn't engage in the drama they've orchestrated. That person just gives a soft smile and responds with something as simple as, "Sounds nice," then goes back to whatever they were doing, leaving no energy for the narcissist to latch onto. So what happens next? Not a loud confrontation, not an intense showdown, but something far more powerful. Silence, a moment that shakes the narcissist's world to its core. I witnessed a moment like that a few years ago at a family gathering, an experience still etched in my memory as if it happened yesterday. A man full of confidence and impossible to ignore charisma took over the entire space. He talked about his new job, his lavish international trips, and the influential people he knew, as if the whole room should hold its breath to listen. Most people played along. Some nodded politely, others sat silently, with a hint of annoyance in their eyes, but still focused on him. Then I noticed a woman sitting quietly in the corner of the table. She didn't say much, just nodded politely when needed, offering the bare minimum of social courtesy. When the man turned to her and, with a smug smile, asked, "What do you think about my new car? It cost over 80 grand. She simply smiled and replied, "Sounds nice. Congratulations." Then she continued eating, offering no further comment, no admiration, no envy. A while later, she stood up and said to the table, "I should head out now. Thank you all for having me tonight," and left with calm grace, as if his story hadn't left the slightest ripple on her world. That moment was breathtaking. The man hesitated, his story suddenly losing steam, as if the perfect picture he painted had just been wiped away. He tried to go on, but his voice grew softer, his eyes scanning the room, looking for the attention that had quietly slipped away. No one criticized him, no one embarrassed him, but the quiet presence of that woman, her effortless authenticity, completely disoriented him. It wasn't a battle, it wasn't a dramatic scene, it was a simple truth. When narcissism meets authenticity, their world falls apart. Not because someone overpowered them, but because there's nothing left for them to feed on. Today we're going to explore what really happens in these kinds of encounters, why they're so powerful, and what they mean for you in your everyday life, at work, in your family, and in your relationships. This isn't a story about defeating narcissists. It's not about bringing them down with sharp comebacks. It's a story about the power of authenticity, a power that doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to shine brightly, yet has the strength to change everything. I want you to stay with me, not just to listen, but to feel this deeply, to see how it can change the way you live and how you respond to those who try to pull you into their drama. You deserve to know this, and more than that, you deserve to live it. To understand what really happens when a narcissist encounters authenticity, we first need to look at how they operate. Narcissists don't just want attention, they need it, like air to breathe. Every boast, every exaggerated story, every dramatic gesture is an attempt to fill an emptiness inside, a void they cannot face on their own. They need your praise to feel worthy. You're amazing, like a dose of medicine to soothe their insecurity. They need your arguments to feel important. You can't say that as a way to validate their existence in the eyes of others. Even your silence while listening, just watching them, feeds the hungry ego they carry. This isn't speculation, it's how their minds work. It's a system built on an insatiable need, a cycle they can't escape without someone else fueling it. Think of a narcissist you've met. Maybe a coworker who always highlights their achievements in meetings, as if the entire team should pause and applaud. Or maybe a friend who turns every conversation into an opportunity to talk about themselves, regardless of who was speaking before. They don't just want your attention, they demand it. Not as a reward, but as a condition for their very sense of self. When they walk into a room, they're not seeking connection, they're seeking an audience, a crowd ready to supply the validation they crave. And if you give it to them, if you compliment, argue, or simply listen, they'll continue, day after day, because that's how they keep their sense of identity alive. But what happens when they get nothing? What happens when they run into someone who doesn't play by their script? Someone who doesn't give them the stage they so desperately need? That's where authenticity shows up, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Authenticity doesn't need an audience, doesn't crave approval, doesn't require drama to exist. It's a state of being true to oneself, knowing who you are, believing in your own worth without needing anyone to validate it. Authentic people don't exaggerate their strengths to seem superior, nor do they hide their weaknesses to avoid judgment. They manage their emotions, not because they're cold or detached, but because they understand when to speak and when to stay silent. They don't live to please others, don't chase recognition, and don't bow to the pressure of being someone they're not. In a world where many wear masks just to fit in, authenticity is freedom. It's the ability to stand tall without applause, without nods of approval. Now, imagine a person like that facing off with a narcissist. The narcissist walks in, ready to dominate the space, to talk about their latest victory, expecting the usual admiration. But the authentic person doesn't respond the way they expect. They might say, "Sounds nice," in a calm, grounded tone. No over-the-top praise, no jealousy. Then simply return to what they were doing, as if the narcissist's story isn't the center of the universe. The narcissist becomes unsettled because they're not receiving the fuel they need, no flattery to inflate the ego, no conflict to keep the drama going. They try harder, add more details, raise their voice, but the authentic person remains unbothered, unengaged, offering nothing that the narcissist can feed on. And that's when everything starts to shift. Not because the authentic person attacks, but because they simply refuse to play the game. So what happens next? The narcissist doesn't know what to do. They're used to people reacting, whether it's admiration, confrontation, or just attention. But when faced with authenticity, they're met with emptiness, a silence they can't fill. This isn't just theory, it's something you can witness in everyday life, from workplace dynamics to casual social gatherings. When narcissists encounter authenticity, their world begins to shake, not because someone is stronger than them, but because they're no longer being supplied with the energy they depend on to function. And we're going to go deeper into this, exploring how it happens and why it's so powerful. Now, imagine a specific situation, something you may have witnessed or even experienced yourself. A narcissist walks into a meeting room and declares, "I just closed a massive deal. Nobody else in this team could have pulled that off." With a tone full of pride, scanning the room for admiration, envy, or at least some kind of reaction. People usually get pulled in. Some say, "That's amazing," even if they don't really care. Others stay silent but still listen, even if they feel annoyed inside. But then they encounter someone who doesn't play along. That person simply says, "Congratulations," with a calm smile, no exaggeration, no drama, and then turns to the colleague beside them and asks, "Hey, did you finish your report yet?" The narcissist pauses, not because they're satisfied, but because they don't know what to do next. They need attention, they need an audience. But this person refuses to provide it. What happens when a narcissist meets authenticity? They begin to wobble, not because they've been attacked, but because they've been left alone with themselves. I once saw this play out in a friend group, a quiet moment that left a lasting impression. One guy constantly told stories about how he outperformed his rivals at work. With each retelling, the story got more exaggerated, like he was crafting a movie about himself. He waited for people to be impressed, to ask questions or at least look amazed. Most of us went along with it. Some offered compliments just to keep the mood light, even as we glanced at our phone. But one woman in the group, quiet and not one to seek attention, just listened without reacting. When he turned to her and asked, "What do you think about how I handled that situation?" she replied, "Sounds like a busy day. I'm happy for you," and then turned to another person and asked, "So, what are your plans this weekend?" He tried to jump back in, adding more dramatic details, but she didn't return to the topic, just nodded politely and went back to her own conversation. Eventually he got frustrated and said, "You don't care about anything, do you?" then sulked off to sit in the corner. She didn't respond, didn't explain, didn't do anything but continue being herself. So what happened there? The narcissist needed a stage, and she refused to be the audience. He needed attention to feel significant, but she gave him nothing, no praise, no conflict, nothing at all. And in the end, he lost his momentum, not because someone pushed him out, but because there was nothing for him to hold on to. You'll see this pattern again and again. When narcissists encounter authenticity, they often respond by criticizing, "She's so cold, he's arrogant," or "That person just doesn't know how to connect." But notice something, they rarely try to pull that authentic person in again. Why? Because they realize there's no win, not because they've been defeated, but because there's nothing to fight. Authenticity doesn't provide fuel for their ego, no compliments to inflate, no drama to sustain, no emotional energy to cling to. I saw another example of this at a dinner party. One person kept dominating the conversation, telling long-winded stories, interrupting others, doing everything they could to stay in the spotlight. People gradually grew tired. Some tried to chime in but were drowned out. Others sat quietly with empty stares. After a while, a friend of mine stood up and said, "I should get going, thanks for the evening," then left with a gentle smile. No one thought he was rude. In fact, a few people quietly whispered, "I wish I could do that too." The narcissist tried to keep the momentum going, but the energy in the room had shifted. He no longer held everyone's attention. He wasn't criticized, wasn't confronted. But the authenticity of that one person walking away, refusing to engage in the drama, threw him off completely. When narcissists encounter authenticity, they don't just lose the stage, they lose the entire script. They rely on you to help maintain their sense of self, but authentic people don't offer that. They don't take things personally, don't feel threatened, don't get pulled into the narcissist's game. They simply remain themselves, and that alone is enough to shake the narcissist. Not because they are weak, but because they have nothing left to grasp. This is the power of authenticity. It doesn't need to fight, it doesn't need to argue, it simply needs to exist, and it changes everything. Why does the narcissist crumble when faced with authenticity? To answer that question, we need to dive into 3 layers of understanding: the psychological foundation, how they function in real-life situations, and how they react when the energy they depend on is cut off. This isn't a simple story of who's stronger. This is a deep exploration of how authenticity, with its quiet power, can unravel the entire world the narcissist has painstakingly built. Let's break this down layer by layer, because the answer lies not on the surface but in the depths, where everything becomes clear and undeniable. Psychological studies have shown that narcissists don't just enjoy attention, they depend on it. This isn't a preference, it's a survival mechanism, born from deep-rooted insecurity. They lack the ability to validate their own worth. They can't look in the mirror and say, "I'm enough," unless someone else says it first. Instead, they need others to do it for them. Praise to feel valuable, conflict to feel significant, your presence to feel like they exist. It's a vicious cycle. They exaggerate achievements, tell grand stories, and stir up drama, not because they're confident, but because they're afraid. Afraid that without attention, they'll vanish, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. Think of it like a hollow jar. The narcissist carries that jar around, begging everyone to fill it with praise, envy, or at least some attention. Every reaction you give, whether positive or negative, is a drop of water that makes the jar feel less empty. But authenticity doesn't pour into that jar. Authentic people don't carry empty jars. They've already filled theirs with inner confidence, with self-awareness that doesn't rely on external approval. So when the narcissist presents their jar, hoping for a drop, the authentic person simply smiles and turns away. not out of malice, but because they don't live to fill anyone else's jar. And that's when the narcissist starts to panic. Because the jar is still empty, not for lack of effort, but because they aren't getting what they need to keep going. In real life, the narcissist functions like an actor on a stage, and they need an audience for the play to mean something. I once worked with a colleague who turned every meeting into his personal performance. He'd walk in declaring, "I just wrapped up this project in record time. Nobody else could have done it like I did," with a proud tone and eyes scanning the room for applause. Some people politely said, "That's impressive," even though they didn't care. Others stayed quiet but still looked at him, despite feeling irritated inside. He wasn't just telling stories, he was putting on a show, crafting every line to draw people in. But then he met another manager, someone who simply didn't participate in the play. When he asked, "What do you think about how I handled that project?" the manager replied, "Sounds good, congrats," and immediately turned to someone else asking, "Where are we on this week's report?" What happened there? The narcissist needed an audience, not just to watch, but to clap, to argue, to keep the play going. But this manager didn't step on stage. He didn't offer inflated praise, didn't argue to fuel the drama, didn't give the attention the narcissist craved. The narcissist tried again. I pulled an all-nighter to finish it, but the manager just nodded. "I see. Let's focus on the next step now." The narcissist went silent, not out of satisfaction, but because there was no one left watching his performance. After the meeting, he complained to me, "That guy doesn't know how to appreciate people." But the truth is, he didn't need to. He wasn't there to be anyone's audience. And that's what unraveled the narcissist's entire script. Think about another moment, a family gathering I once attended. A relative with his theatrical flair started talking about his recent trip to Europe. "I stayed in a 5-star hotel, met celebrities. No one else in this family has ever done anything like that." Everyone got drawn in. Some said, "That's amazing." Others stayed quiet but still listened. He needed that. He needed everyone to confirm how special, how important he was. But there was one older sister in the family, calm, reserved, and uninterested in the spotlight. When he turned to her and asked, "So, what do you think of my trip?" she replied, "Sounds like a fun time. I'm happy for you." And then turned to someone else and asked, "How are the kids doing?" He tried again. "I even met a famous designer." But she simply nodded and continued her own conversation. Eventually he got frustrated and said, "You don't care about anything." But she didn't respond, didn't explain. She simply stayed true to herself. He no longer had an audience, no longer had a stage, and his performance collapsed, not because someone destroyed it, but because no one continued it. When narcissists don't get the attention they need, their response often follows a clear pattern: confusion, escalation, and then collapse. I saw this again at a dinner party with friends. One person kept monopolizing the conversation, bragging about his latest business success. "I just closed $1 million deal. No one here could even imagine that." He cut others off, raised his voice, did everything to stay in the spotlight. People started to get tired. Some tried to speak but were drowned out. Others just sat silently, eyes glazed over. But one friend, quietly confident, didn't engage. When the narcissist asked, "What do you think about that deal?" he replied, "Sounds impressive, congrats," and then turned to me and said, "What are your plans this weekend?" The narcissist was thrown off. He tried again. I had to beat out 3 major companies to win that deal, but the friend just nodded and kept chatting. What happened next? The narcissist didn't know what to do. He was used to people reacting, whether with admiration, disagreement, or at least attention. But when he got nothing, he escalated, told more details, raised his voice, as if shouting louder would finally earn applause. But it didn't. Because the friend wasn't dismissing him, he just wasn't participating in the drama. Eventually, the narcissist got frustrated and said, "You just don't know how to appreciate someone's success," then sulked in a corner, not because he gave up, but because he had no energy left to continue. Later, he told someone, "That guy is so arrogant," but no one agreed. Everyone could see who really needed the attention and who was simply being themselves. Here's the key takeaway. Narcissists fail in the presence of authenticity because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't need recognition from them. I've seen another friend criticized by a narcissist in the group for not being enthusiastic enough. He said, "You never contribute, you're always so quiet," hoping she'd explain or apologize, but she just smiled gently and said, "I'm not great at these things, I prefer listening," then went back to her work. He tried again, talking about his accomplishments, but she didn't respond. No praise, no argument. Eventually, he gave up and moved on to someone else. Later, he said, "She's so stuck up," but no one believed it. She didn't need him to feel valuable, and that made him powerless, not because she was stronger, but because she simply didn't give him what he needed to keep going. Authenticity is powerful because it doesn't play by the narcissist's rules. They need you to keep their ego alive. But authentic people don't offer that. They don't get pulled into drama. They can't be manipulated by compliments or guilt. They don't live to be someone's audience. And when a narcissist meets authenticity, they are confronted with their own emptiness. Not because someone points it out, but because there's no one left to hide it from. They fail, not because they're weaker, but because there's no energy left to sustain them. This isn't just theory, it's real life. You've seen it. In meetings, in family dinners, in everyday conversations. Narcissists fail in the presence of authenticity because authenticity doesn't need them, doesn't fuel them, and cannot be controlled by them. And that is the greatest power anyone can hold. What happens when a narcissist meets authenticity isn't just a story about their failure. It's a call for you to live differently. It's an invitation for you to become someone who cannot be dragged down by even the biggest egos. Living authentically isn't about defeating the narcissist in a public battle. It's not a flashy performance to prove you're stronger than them. It's about standing firm, unshaken, simply by being yourself. Living true to your values without needing applause or approval. That is real power, not the power of noise or force, but the quiet strength of inner peace. A strength narcissists cannot reach, cannot manipulate, and cannot break. But how do you live like that? How do you face narcissists? Not with fists, but with the unshakable force of your grounded presence. Let's walk through this together, step by step. Because this isn't just a theory to hear and forget. It's a real path you can start walking today, right now. Authentic living begins not with confronting the narcissist, but with facing yourself, the person you see in the mirror every day. And that's not easy. It means looking straight at the patterns that have shaped you. Some you may not even want to admit. Have you ever tried to please someone just to avoid conflict? Maybe a coworker bragged during a meeting and you nodded, "Yeah, that's cool," even though you didn't care, just to keep the peace. Have you ever stayed silent when you wanted to speak up, afraid of judgment or being cast aside? Maybe a family member exaggerated their achievements and you said nothing, even though you knew it wasn't true, just to avoid offending them. Those moments don't make you weak, but they slowly pull you away from who you are, forcing you to live by someone else's script instead of your own. To live authentically, you must stop and ask yourself, who am I when no one's watching? What do I believe in when no one is telling me what to believe? This isn't a question to answer casually. It's a question to sit with, to write about. Take a pen and paper, not your phone, and write down the 3 most important values in your life. Maybe it's family, not out of duty, but because of the deep love that drives you to protect them. Maybe it's your work, not just for a paycheck, but because it gives you purpose and the feeling that you're building something meaningful. Maybe it's peace of mind, not a luxury, but a vital necessity in a world filled with noise. Write them down, hold that paper, keep it close, because those are your compass when a narcissist tries to drag you into their drama. I remember sitting in a cafe, watching people around me lost in noisy conversations and screens. I pulled out my notebook and wrote 3 words: family, integrity, time for myself. When an acquaintance walked in and started boasting, "I just bought a new apartment at sky-high price," I didn't feel the need to praise him to make him feel better. I simply said, "Sounds nice. and returned to my writing. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to join in to feel enough. He tried to share more, but I didn't give him a stage. Eventually, he left. Not because I was rude, but because I stayed loyal to myself. And you can do that too, starting today, by knowing who you are and holding on to that, no matter who tries to pull you away from it. Living authentically isn't just about knowing who you are. It's about defending that truth when others try to invade it. Narcissists will always try to pull you into their world, not because they want connection, but because they need you to maintain their sense of self. They'll boast, "I just got promoted, no one deserved it more than me," waiting for your admiration. They'll criticize, "You could never do what I do," waiting for you to argue. They'll dominate conversations, not letting you speak, waiting for you to sit quietly and listen. But you don't have to play along, not because you're cold, but because you have the right to protect your energy, your time, your peace. The way you face a narcissist is by setting boundaries, not with shouting or confrontation, but with simple, firm words that need no explanation. When they brag, say, "Congratulations." That's it. No over-the-top praise, no envy, then return to your work. When they criticize, say, "I disagree, but thank you for sharing." No justification, no emotional tug-of-war, just move on. When they dominate a conversation, say, "I need to focus on something else, we'll talk later," not harsh, just clear, and then walk away. I once worked with someone who bragged constantly in meetings. One day I said, "That's great, but I need to finish this report," and turned back to my screen. He tried again, but I didn't respond. Not out of hatred, but because I don't live to be his audience. Eventually he moved on, and I kept my peace. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing narcissists out of your life. It's about refusing to let them pull you into their chaos. You don't owe them explanations. You don't need to justify your peace. They might call you cold, distant, or selfish, but that's just their attempt to reclaim the attention you won't give them. Remember, you don't exist to please them. You exist to stay true to yourself. Every time you say no to their drama, you're saying yes to your values. And that's a power they can never touch. One of the most powerful ways to live authentically is knowing when to walk away. Not because you're weak, not because you're giving up, but because you refuse to waste your energy on what isn't worth it. The narcissist will try to keep you around, not because they need you, but because they need your attention. They'll drag you into stories, manipulate your emotions, or criticize you to provoke a reaction. But you don't have to stay. You don't have to endure. You don't have to sacrifice your peace to keep them satisfied. I remember attending a family gathering where one relative dominated every conversation, bragging endlessly about his job, his expensive trips, never letting anyone else speak. Everyone grew tired, but no one dared to leave, afraid of seeming rude. After 30 minutes, I stood up and said, "I have to go now, thank you for the evening," and walked out. He called after me, "Where are you going?" "I'm not done talking yet," but I just smiled and kept walking. Later, several people messaged me, "I wish I could have done that." Walking away isn't escaping. It's a declaration that you don't have to stay in spaces that drain you. Not because you can't handle it, but because you don't want to. Practice this in your own life. If a conversation feels suffocating, say, "I need a break, talk later," and leave. If a relationship is full of drama, say, "I need space, we can talk another time," and step back. If an environment no longer serves you, like a workplace where a narcissist manipulates the room, say, "Thank you for the opportunity, but I'm done here," and walk away with your head held high. Every time you walk away, you're not giving up, you're choosing yourself, you're protecting your energy. And that's something the narcissist will never understand or control. They may talk behind your back, but their words can't touch you because you don't live to please them. Living authentically isn't a tactic to deal with narcissists for one day. It's a way of life that ensures you'll never be pulled down by them. Not today, not tomorrow, never. I once met a friend who always stood firm in the presence of even the biggest egos. In a team meeting, someone was bragging non-stop. "I just closed the biggest client in the company, no one else could do that." Everyone got drawn in, but she simply said, "Sounds great," and kept taking notes. He tried to pull her in again. "Aren't you impressed?" She smiled and replied, "I'm happy for you, but I need to stay focused." He gave up, not because she won, but because she refused to play his game. Later, he told others, "She's so full of herself," but no one agreed. Because everyone saw the truth, she didn't need him to feel enough. And this is the power you can claim. Know who you are. Set your boundaries. Walk away when needed. Live by your values. Narcissists fail in the presence of authenticity, not because you're stronger in a fight, but because you don't need them to stand tall. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't live for recognition, and that makes them powerless. Start today with one small choice. The next time a narcissist tries to pull you into their drama, simply say, "No, I'm not playing that game," and watch them falter, not because you pushed them away, but because you didn't give them what they need. This isn't theory. This is life, and you have the power to live it right now. When a narcissist meets authenticity, what happens isn't just their failure, it's your victory. Not by defeating them, but by standing tall in who you are. They crumble, not because you shouted louder, not because you argued better, but because you didn't give them what they need to survive: attention, validation, or participation in their drama. Authenticity is a quiet power. It doesn't need a spotlight, it doesn't need a fight, yet it has the strength to shake the very foundation of the narcissist's world. It doesn't just leave them powerless, it empowers you. It allows you to live truthfully, to stand firm in front of even the loudest egos, untouched, unmanipulated, unshaken. This isn't a story about defeating someone. It's a story about becoming someone, about choosing a life where no narcissist, no ego, no outside force gets to define who you are. Imagine a life where you no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone, where you walk into a room full of drama and leave with your peace still intact. That's what happens when you live authentically. The narcissist may try, but they will fail, not because you appear stronger in their eyes, but because you are strong enough in your own. I want you to feel this, not just hear it, not just nod and move on, but let it settle into you. Let it become a part of you. If this message resonates with something deep inside you, if that inner voice is whispering, "I want to live this way, I can live this way," then hit the like button, not for me, but for yourself, as a small declaration, a quiet commitment that you see this, you want this, and you will live this. Subscribe if you're ready to keep walking this path, not for me, but because you deserve a life free from being dragged down by narcissists, a life where you stand tall, without applause, without validation. Share this video with someone who needs it, not as a random act, but as a powerful invitation. Maybe it's a coworker trapped in the drama of a demanding boss, unsure how to break free. Maybe it's a friend, exhausted from trying to please someone who constantly demands attention. Maybe it's a family member who's forgotten they have the right to walk away when things become too much. They need to hear this. They need to feel that they don't have to endure, that they have the power to live differently. And you could be the person who brings them that light, not a bystander but a guide, through one small act that could change their life. Thank you for being here with me today. Not just watching, but showing up. Not just listening, but choosing. This isn't a video for entertainment. This is a call to live authentically, to live boldly, to live in a way that no one can ever pull you away from who you truly are. Next time, we'll go even deeper into how to face rejection without losing yourself. Because living authentically isn't just about dealing with narcissists, it's about facing the entire world when necessary, without breaking. Until then, keep this close to your heart. When a narcissist meets authenticity, they fail. But you win, not by defeating them, but by fully becoming yourself. Start today, not tomorrow, not someday, but right now, with one small, unshakable choice. Be yourself, not halfway, but fully. And I'll see you again soon, not goodbye, but see you again, because this journey isn't over. It's just beginning.